And when we teach our young people from a very early age that whether you work for yourself or you work for others, it's always going to come back to the bottom line and maximizing resources. And when you teach them that from early on, they understand it. They understand finance, they understand money, they understand business, and they understand that how do I find the most efficient way to do X, Y, Z? And how do I do that in my business or in the business that I work for? And so it's literally shifting the mind of our young people, as they go. And I promise you, as I know this is not happening in your everyday school. I know. I don't even care if it's a private preparatory school. It's not happening there because that's not the nature of education.
These are concepts that is for every parent, auntie, grandma. Like if there are children in your life, this is a relevant discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome, audience, and welcome, Claudine Winston. I'm so glad to have you here. I appreciate you. I've been all about inspired action because it's not enough to say no. We really have to get into creating the world that we want to see. So I'm a little bit of just to a little bit about your background, right? So that our audience can get to know you a little better. You have an M.B.A. in finance, right? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. So, I started out with a political science degree. I thought I was going to go and work in Congress. That's what my goal was when I first graduated from undergrad. And then I realized that even though I had worked in law firms, as a paralegal, it wasn't really something that I wanted to do. My goal, honestly, when I first went to undergrad was that I was going to be the first melanated U.S. senator, female senator. And that was my goal. And then I started working in the law firms and I started looking at the process and I felt like this isn't me. I'm a very creative person. And I needed to be involved in things that allowed me to continuously be creative. So those were my first jobs. But my first real job out of college was in advertising and marketing. So I worked for some of the biggest companies in the world. Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline, Endo Pharmaceuticals, Percocet and Lidoderm, and just a whole host of pharmaceutical clients. And those were the last set of clients that I had before I left the advertising industry. And it was interesting, to say the least, to be able to be a part of the process of putting together marketing, collateral, websites, so on and so forth. I did work for the big tech giants as well. At the time, Compaq, which later became Hewlett Packard, Compaq, which later became Hewlett Packard, also IBM. That's how I started in that field, working in customer relationship management, which you guys now call CRM. IBM, we were the first ones who worked on CRM. There was no CRM platform out there, and we built that system for IBM. And we then did it again, another version of it for Compaq, which again later became Hewlett Packard. And after the .com bust, a lot of the jobs in that interactive space, that's what we call digital advertising, interactive space, kind of went goodbye because a lot of those .com companies were gone, and a lot of the financial resources that back those companies was no longer running fluently. And so I actually stepped into the real estate space. It was something that I really loved, and it was great because you can own an asset and you can sell it and you can make money and so on and so forth. But of course, we know that was yet another bubble. And even though I was involved in real estate more from a personal perspective, I was involved also in real estate management estate management of some estates for some very wealthy people, and then mortgages. And in the mortgage industry, it was beautiful. But again, the bubble was about to burst. And so after that time, I needed something. I really liked the finance industry, and I happened to have worked for one of a very big powerhouse in the financial markets. And I said, you know what, let me go back to school and get my degree so I could work on a deeper level within finance. I was looking at mortgage-backed securities and so on and so forth. So that's why I went to school to get my MBA. And when I was done with my MBA, of course, I love school. So it's no surprise that I educate children now because I love school. I love learning. And so after that, I went back to school again. I believe I got my certificate in my certificate in internal audit. I believe either concurrently. I have to remember back. It's over a decade ago. And then I also went back to get a second master's degree in forensic accounting and fraud examination, because I really wanted to get into anti-money laundering and so on and so forth. I decided part of the way through that this isn't really what I want to do, even though I love numbers. I'm a numbers geek and I just love that. That's part of the reason why I find it so important to do what I do now, which is teach our young people S.T.R.E.A.M, which is science, technology, robotics, engineering, arts, and math. And with those core curriculum, you can literally build out an entire system. You can learn your history within all of those subjects. You can learn to read, obviously, within all of those subjects, and really be able to get a very diverse perspective on the world that we're moving towards. Because a lot of what the current educational system does is it's still based on that 100-plus-year-old framework, and our young people need a completely different framework now. And the traditional educational system isn't as nimble as an organization such as ours and other organizations that are directed towards homeschoolers or enrichment. And so that's kind of how I got here, right? It's like I had a child, and when I had a child, I knew that I really didn't want him in a traditional school. At first I thought I did, but then I realized I didn't, but we sent him anyway. And then we had our experiences with that. And then a few years back, we pulled him out and decided that homeschooling was the best for us, because we didn't want him being mistreated because of who he was, for whatever reason that is. We wanted to make sure that he was always safe and confident within himself, and that his self-esteem wasn't going to be eroded by some educator with their ulterior motives and agendas that we know nothing about.
Right.
Weren't going to tolerate for our child.
Right. Which is a wonderful reason to homeschool, actually, right? Because
yes,
we do know that our educational system selects against some people. It just does. That's the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I sent him to private school, so I expected that to be a little bit different. Every school he went to was one that we paid for him to attend, and so for me, it was a challenge to be paying for my child to be mistreated. So, yeah.
Right. It's wonderful that you recognized it, because I think a lot of parents don't even catch on to it, or catch on to it in time.
Right.
So let's talk about, so you, like, your life has been a journey. You've been moving and shaking and doing stuff. And here you are now in the education space, and in particularly in the homeschooling education space.
Yeah.
Right? Where you've got all of these innovative ideas about homeschooling and how to do it in the digital age.
Right.
So talk to me about this, because I'm like, I've been homeschooling for almost 20 years. And so anything homeschooling excites me, just hearing all the possibilities, which are growing now. Like when I think about when I started 20 years ago, I felt there were endless possibilities then, but now, like, it's really endless. Like, there's so much you can do.
Yeah,
So
it is.
talk to us about what you are doing, not just for your son, but you've expanded.
Yes. What happened was I worked with my son, and then I was a part of various cooperatives, and I saw that there was this missing component. I think that everybody, even though parents go through this deschooling process, there's
Mm-hmm.
still somewhat this perspective of what school should look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Because we're
even if you're an
trained.
unschooler, yes, even if you're an unschooler, right? You think, okay, these are the standard ways about going with things. Even though you're having, some people have the mindset that I'm allowing my child to lead. When spending time with them, you realize the child is really not leading. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
perception. It's like this, buzzword, as opposed to really allowing a young person to say, you know what, I really love, let's give an example, gaming. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it's, some parents are, the first thing they're going to push away on that. That's not how I
It makes me a
perceive it.
little scared too.
But for me, I think I'm like one of the biggest kids around, I guess. And so I see the world through their lens. And so from
Uh-huh.
my perspective, it goes, okay, so you like gaming, but I don't believe in young people being just consumers. I believe
Mm.
in being producers. And as a
Okay.
result of that, so if you want to be involved in gaming, I understand that you have to see and engage with the game to understand how they work and how to maneuver them and how one should look and what makes them successful. But taking that same knowledge base, it's important to now translate into, let's create our own games. Okay, how do you utilize code to produce your own game? How do you create your storyboard of what your game's going to look like? How do you write out your script, and how do we then execute that and bring that to the fore, where you now have your own game that you can put in the app store, and then you could produce a revenue from, and so on and so forth. And so all of our programs are built with that mindset in embedded in it. It's all about having the entrepreneurial spirit, regardless if you ever
Mm-hmm.
become an entrepreneur or not. It's
Mm-hmm.
important to have that mindset in everything that you do, because when you do have that mindset, you see it from a more 360 approach, as opposed to a linear approach, that, okay, I'm going to learn this, and this, and this, and then it'll eventually lead to who knows what. But if you understand from the very beginning, okay, this game is not just a game. There's some marketing that goes into it. There's some sales that goes into it. There's some, the mathematics and the science and the art of the graphic design. When you start to understand how all of these things play a role with one another, it gives you a different way to look at learning. And so at that one, with that one objective, okay, we're going to create a game. Do you know how many different subject matter a young person has to go through to be able to produce that game?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, they're going to learn how to read, they're going to learn how to utilize mathematics, they're going to learn how to code, they're going to learn some science, because a lot of times when you're creating a game, like let's say Minecraft, if you're teaching them about trees, like how they'll cut down a tree, but it'll tell them, oh, it comes from the deciduous forest, and so on and so forth. It's these, climate. Sorry, it gets their mind going and learning about all of the different biomes that exist.
Mm.
And without having them understand and appreciate all of those aspects of learning, then you have children that just consume. Oh, I'm just hitting this button and I'm just doing that, but it's so much more than that.
So this is project-based learning, basically.
Yes, it's 100% project-based learning.
Basically, and what I like about project-based learning is, if you're an adult and you've had any success in your life, if you've done or completed anything, you've done some projects.
Mhm.
I mean, successful people do projects.
Yes.
So to educate children from day one, working on projects
Mhm.
and looking at that in a multi-dimensional way, to me, just sounds like a way to educate. Like, to me, I love doing that with with my kids. So I love it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, so basically when you say if the kid is interested in gaming, you're not talking about just letting them sit down, and play video games all
No.
day.
No, no. We decide together what they're looking to learn, and then building curriculum around that.
Mm,
So, for example, if certain games are built in what is called Unity, they are both utilizing C#, and many people think because it's not the visual block system, that young people don't get it. What I've learned about young people is that they the limitations that are traditionally placed on them in a traditional school environment, sometimes as parents, we also bring that home. But I personally don't believe in that. That's what NOBO stands for. It's now boundless. It's like, I believe in the limitless potential of
I was
children.
gonna ask you what,
Yes.
so that's the name of your academy,
Yes,
right?
Noble Kiddo. Yes, it's all about
Okay.
them understanding their truest capacity has no limitation. And so whatever it is that they set their mind to, no matter how big, no matter how outrageous it sounds, as long as they thought it up, that it's achievable. And
Mhm.
so it's important for them to learn that. And that's something that we continuously, impart on them, is that you can do anything. And we really mean it, because a lot of people tell you that, but it's empty on its face, right? But
Right.
for our young people, we need to help them understand that it isn't. There is no limit to what their capacity is. It's like, because if I am probably getting a little nerdy here, I believe in quantum physics, and the reality is when you start thinking about that boundlessness, that limitlessness to the universe to which we live in, how can you then tell a child, how do you box them in when you understand that there is no box?
Mm.
And so
Mm.
it's, for me, important to help our young people learn that from the earliest of ages, whenever they come to us, if it's 5-year-old or if it's, 17 about to graduate, and move on. It's important that we undo, if it was already put into them, this idea of limitation and lack, and help them to
Right.
understand the abundance of the universe we live in, and help them understand that um, it's, I'll give one example. We also do social mixers for children that are in our full day program, and some that just come in for different programs, or they're just there for the social mixer. It's very, very flexible in that way. Um, um, One of our artists, she's a tremendous artist, and she's older, and she's trying to figure out her way. Like, what is she going to do after high school age? What is she going to do with her life? Part of what we do in that particular social mixer, it's all about art, and it's all about them taking their art and creating it, bringing it to life, in that they can turn around and sell it, right? But at first, that's not where we start.
Oh, wait a minute. This is your social mixer?
Our social mixer, everything has a purpose.
Because I'm
Everything
thinking,
has a
okay,
purpose.
social mixer, they just get together and talk about, the latest movies and stuff like
No,
that.
they get together and they talk about art and their artistic expression. So there are a bunch of these are preteen and teenage girls. And one has designed a pocketbook, and we've gone through it and figured out how she's going to put it together on Etsy, and she's going to be able, and we get into pricing and why it costs XYZ, and how you're going to be able to advertise it, market it, everything. And then one is she does comics and other art form. There's another one who does edible art. There's it just depends on who they are. And so what it is okay, we take the beauty of what it is that you created. Now, how do we translate this into a marketable product for the public? But the whole
I
time
love
they're
it.
going through that social mixer and talking about their ideas and everything, they start to modify, they adjust, they figure out what works, what doesn't work. They're going through that whole product development process. And then when they get to the end of that product development process, okay, now it's time to put it to the marketplace. So for them, it's just like, oh, we're in here, we're talking about our art, but then it always has an objective at the end. And
I
so even
love
our
it.
young people have a different, like, it just depends on where they fit. And it also isn't just limited to a state or a region. It's limited to nowhere. Like, it's everywhere. And so, in that particular girls art program, that's an international program, because there are children from outside of the United States, and the kids don't all live in the same state. And so there's there, and they don't live in the same neighborhood. And that's one of the things that I'm most proud of about Novo Kiddos, because we live it and breathe it in a multidimensional way, right? It's not
Mhm.
just, okay, we're telling them, but they're still surrounded by the same friends that they had if they had gone to school, right?
Mhm.
No, it's like, if you have a child that's here in the United States, they have a different perspective from a child who lives, let's say, in Canada, or someone who lives in France, or someone who lives, in another English speaking country for now, right? But
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, they're getting to see the world through the lens of other children from other places,
I
right?
like that.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Thank
So
you.
tell me, what do you do? Like, if for your third graders? Like, what's your vision for like a first through third grader who's young? You know, how much can they do?
Oh, they can do tremendous amounts of things. So one of our, I'll talk to you about another social mixer we have where the kids are different. Those are kids that would be K through 3. And in there, those are the ones who talk about creating their games. One creating a game. One is in the business of creating various forms of slime. She considers herself a chemist, and so she looks at slime from very different perspectives, and she's always trying to edit and modify slime so that she creates really unique slime.
So wait a minute, you said K to 3, right?
Yes. Yes.
So she considers herself a chemist.
Yes, she does.
I love that.
Yes, she does. And that's how you broach the conversation of talking about chemistry and literally putting different chemicals together and seeing how they react. Like when we create our exploding volcanoes and stuff like that. It just depends on the class, but yeah. And so all the different things, like learning how, even when you mix colors, what does that do? Like chemical reaction, all of these different things are important. In K through 3, we even teach graphic design. A lot of them know how to utilize Canva and go in and create logos and their business cards. And at one point, I'm just giving you examples of the different, one of the young kids in our program, they wanted to open up an animal sanctuary. So part of the animal sanctuary, they had to understand budgets and numbers. And so for most people, you would never talk to children who are, let's say, in first or second grade about numbers that are 7 or 8 digits long, but to help them understand the scope of how much does a giraffe cost, or how are you going to get the money to get the giraffe, how do you transport the giraffe, you understand. And so we have those conversations, and they get to understand like money, they get to understand numbers, they get to understand how would you create a sanctuary and be able to make it work and make it make sense. And so we talk about that, and that's how they learn how to, again, get to those bigger numbers, understand that you can't buy an animal for $500 and think that that's going to work, and how much you charge people to come into your animal sanctuary, and how do you hire zoologists, and what's the purpose of them, and so we have those conversations at that very young age, so they get to have a perspective on the world around them, as opposed to people thinking, oh, well, they're just 5, 6, or 7. They don't know any better. They can't have these conversations. No, we do have those conversations. And so, yeah.
I'm just like, whoa, this is really great. I mean, because we can talk about how, we can critique the education system to the cows come home, but that won't change a thing. Right? What makes the change is people like you who say, you know what, that's not what I want. No to that. And so let me teach my own. But I'm thinking at some point, being a homeschooler myself, you realize that you can't raise him in a bubble.
No.
Right? That there had to be more too, especially if you're raising him different than most people raise their kids, that there needed to be this community.
Right. And that was very important for us as well, is to have a sense of community. Like, one of the things that we're going to bring back is I had to pull my schedule back a bit because I just had so many things going, so many kids, and I was still also putting together our summit to bring more of what we do to the world out there. That's how we created Crypto Kids. So Crypto Kids, I'll just say this before I move on. Crypto Kids is about teaching young people about the blockchain and how to create their own cryptocurrency. And so it was, through that, and teaching them financial literacy through that process. Right.
And how young are you teaching this?
That's what happened. I had to modify it because it's like, I'm so used to the kids that we teach every day. That I push them, but if the kids aren't getting that outside, I had to modify and create a version where it speaks differently to our young people, as opposed to the kids that would be traditionally in our program, because they get it. When you start a child off and you're having conversations with them, and you don't, I hate to use this word, but dumb it down, and you're using, vocabulary that may be beyond your traditional first, second, or third grader, they pick it up. They learn it. They're not limited.
Like language.
Yes.
Right. Just like they learn language anyway, right?
Right.
Throwing in some bigger words, it shouldn't be that big a deal. If you think about it.
It's the same as if you're a parent and you utilize a higher level vocabulary with your children every day. That's how they're going to communicate. And so
Mhm.
it was important for us to make sure that we left no child out where they felt like they couldn't understand. So we created two versions of
Okay.
the Crypto Kids so that younger kids could get it, but it's still not like the other one where literally they're understanding how to fully and functionally create a digital currency. And that for me was just so that young people could truly understand what is taking place currently in the world. Like, back in 2009, Bitcoin came out for the first time, January 3rd, 2009. And now all of a sudden, um, a little over a decade later, that coin is worth for any given day between $40,000 and $60,000. Where is that intrinsic value? How do you have the conversation with a young person about that, and how and what would it take for them to be able to create a coin and then turn that into something, and how many people could they get it to invest in their coin and then build a system around that. It's just having the conversations with them, and even if sometimes it goes over their head, kids are very resilient and brilliant, and they'll come back because they may not hit them at first, but then they come back and, well, what about, and they're asking you other questions, and you realize that the whole time their heads, it's been spinning around, and they want to be able to understand and be able to really grasp what it is. They get excited about learning. And then it goes back to, once again, if they are the ones who brought the ideas to you and this is something they want to do,
Mhm.
you can't get them to separate from what they want to do.
Right.
I have this one, he just turned 6, he's a kindergartner. He really loves coding, and it gets his goat if for whatever reason, when he's coding, he runs into an error. It just, it makes him so uncomfortable that he wants to work on it continuously until it's done. In some environments that would cause a parent or, people to judge that child, that they're so
Mhm.
single, laser focused on wanting to do this. I'm okay with that, right? Because
Okay.
you can find time to put in all the other learning because you're the parent. Or, if they have an instructor like one of us, at the end of the day, we still have that patience for a young person, because it's about them being able to find that mastery for them. We have an
Mhm.
entire year to achieve whatever it is we're supposed to be achieving for that year. We don't need to put them in a box in that moment and make them feel like, oh, well, you can't do this because we have this on the schedule. It's important to allow them to work through those things, because you don't know what it does in their brain to afford them the opportunity to, want to learn and go down another quote unquote rabbit hole, so to speak, and find their way out the other side. And
Right.
there's so much involved in coding that, yeah. So I don't want to I don't want to ramble on, but I just think that
And it's very interesting though. And an audience, chime in, put it in the comments, send us a message. Um, we're gonna put how to reach you at towards the end of the show. We'll tell people how to reach you, but let Claudine know what you think, and I'm blown away because I know, like, I was like full of all of these ideas, but I don't even know what cryptocurrency is. Honestly, I still haven't wrapped my head around that. My son does, like, he talks to me about it, and I'm just like, I can't wrap my head around it. Well, I shouldn't say I can't, right? Because that's programming too.
yes, yes, it
But
is.
I just haven't wrapped my head around it.
Yeah,
So that you're teaching kids how to actually create their own
yes, yes.
cryptocurrency,
Yep, yep.
and you
Because
have
we can. It's a very
right.
simple. It's very, that's a different coding language. As I mentioned before, C# is for Unity and Unreal Engine. That's the gaming engines, and then we
Mhm.
also teach them how to depending on the child, again, and their interest. But you can also learn to rig 3D animation in Unity, but you can also learn it in one of our Adobe programs as well. So there's the option for that. But then with regards to blockchain, that's a Python based
Mhm.
coding. And there are different things like coding for apps. They're just different levels and layers for where the young person wants to be. I think it's
Mhm.
important for us to remain flexible and nimble for our young people, because in this new digital decade, the jobs that society had open and there were, plentiful, are not going to
Mhm.
be there in 3 to 5 years. And I talk a lot about automation,
And they're saying it, but I don't know that people are actually hearing it because I
they're
don't
not
see people
hearing.
actually doing anything different with their kids
Nope.
to prepare them. They're going into huge amounts of debt to go to college and things like that. And I don't know that people are hearing that a lot of these companies aren't going to be hiring these kids for those degrees anymore. They're saying it. In
Yeah,
fact, so many of the big companies are pulling out and saying, "We don't care about your degree.
right,
We want the skill set.
right,
That's the most important." They
right,
want kids that can complete those young people that can complete those projects. They don't really care if you've got a piece of paper from some school that you paid a lot of money for. They just don't care. And
no,
they're
they
going to
don't.
care less and less as we move forward. And so I'm going to be doing shows like this because I really want people to start thinking
Yeah,
about it's not enough to say no to stuff. We really have to start looking forward and we really have to start being creative about what it is we want to see, right? If we win the battle today, what do we want to see?
right, right.
You know?
Yeah, it's important because I know that the government has its initiatives for how they want to transition STEM,
Mhm.
um, but the arts always seems to be missing there. And it's important that our young people understand that just being, able to code is not enough. Having the ability to think creatively gives you that edge. And it's important for our young people also to understand just when a person goes to school to learn coding, like if they go and get a degree, that is not the same as a person who sits and learns how to code and is really an ace at coding. Because what
Mhm.
happens in the traditional education environment, the traditional university environment, it's more about theory, not actualization of things. And
What
so that's why you have companies like I believe Facebook, but I definitely know Google, that you don't have to have a degree. They're taking that out.
I think both. I
Yeah, I
think I've
believe
heard
it
it
is
from
both.
all of these, a lot of it, not all
Yes.
yet, but a lot of them.
Yeah,
A lot of
because
the biggest,
yeah,
most successful companies want production. Like they want people who can come and complete that project,
right,
that know how to think through
right,
a problem and know how to solve a problem,
right,
right? Because
right.
the skill of problem solving, right? It's a skill set.
And that's why we teach the entrepreneurial perspective, because when you come into an organization and you understand how the various departments work and why they work, then you
Mhm,
understand your place within that environment and you
mhm.
understand how what you do impacts the overall bottom line. And so, are you not a better employee, so to speak? I also believe in people learning how to run their own businesses, but you're
Mhm.
a better employee when you understand the bottom line, why it is that you're able to that you need to produce XYZ, but also from running your own mini business while you're in a program like ours, you also understand project management. You also understand that when one thing is delayed, it impacts the overall, the whole. And so it's
Mhm.
just so many different of these real life skills that we work through with young people so that they understand how one thing impacts the other. And so, yes, with regards to the digital decade, it's important that parents understand that, I've heard a lot of parents say, even parents within the homeschooling community, my kids are just not into coding. Well, it's important that they learn. It's like
Yeah, 'cause you won't.
learning like math. If you're not like a lot of people don't even want to learn math. But here's the thing: if you don't know how to count, can you survive in the world? No. So
Right.
we
Yeah.
have to look at coding like that. Are you going to be able to survive in the future? No. The reason being is because automation is coming in, and even the jobs that you think automation will not take over, it will. Like I've had the conversation in some of my rooms that I host. Automation impacts doctors.
Yeah,
Automation
I
impacts
think a lot of
lawyers.
yes. A
It
lot of
impacts
people don't understand, and a lot of people don't understand that doctors and lawyers and all of these these fields where you go to school for so long, aren't going to really be there.
Not
Like
in
they're
the capacity that
planning
it
on,
currently is.
and I know how I figured it out because I see how protocol based that field is right now. And I came home frustrated one day after talking to a doctor about my care or whatever. I don't remember the conversation. And he kept defaulting to protocol. And I was just like, well, gee, like, why can't we think, why
Outside.
can't he think outside of these protocols? What difference would it be if there was a computer? In the way my mind goes, I thought, well, I wonder if that's the plan. Like, why would you train humans like this? And I looked it up. And if you look it up, you'll find that the plan is there to automate medicine pretty much. There won't
Yes.
be many doctors.
Or
Um,
nurses.
no,
Or
like
nurses.
they're thinking that a robot can do what they do, and
Yes.
you won't miss it because you're getting robots now anyway.
Mhm. Of
And I'm not saying that to insult doctors and because I know there's some good
course not.
doctors out there.
Right.
I know there's some wonderful nurses. I know there's some wonderful nurses out there,
Of course,
you
of course,
know?
but we have to speak the truth. We
Right,
can't sugarcoat this, and so
right.
the thing is I remember someone sharing with me, "Well, who's gonna distribute the medicines?" They've already started retrofitting hospitals to have the medicines come down chutes into the room, okay?
Mhm.
The beds are starting to have more intelligence behind them. When they speak about, artificial intelligence, that's the artificial intelligence they're talking about. People are so focused on transhumanism, they're not there yet because they have to be able to get to abductive reasoning first with regards to, and no one's working on that part of reasoning, the three layers of reasoning. They're working through the other two, but not the abduction. And so I won't get into that really quickly, but the reality is a lot of what nurses do, they're already in the process of creating technologies to replace a lot of that work. So what you would have is nurses that are more senior, potentially keeping their positions because they're the ones who can oversee what the machines do, and people
Mhm.
who understand how to fix those machines. But look at stores. Like I talk to people about, just let's talk about our young people for this moment. When I grew up, you go and you work at a grocery store or in a mall or something like that. Well, if you have the self-checkouts and you no longer have, the customer service representatives, and if you go into banks and you no longer need tellers because the machines are acting as tellers, then
Mhm.
where do those jobs go? How many of those positions are now going to be replaced with automation? I remember I kept saying to myself, "Oh, Whole Foods hasn't gotten the self checkouts yet." And so I kept thinking about that over the last few months or whatever. And then I go into Whole Foods last week, and Whole Foods has self checkout now.
Really?
Oh yeah. And I go, it has finally begun because you see it in Walmart, you see it in Target,
Uh-huh.
you see it in the big chains, and
Mhm.
Whole Foods. We all have to remember Whole Foods is a part of Amazon, and Amazon is
Mhm.
all about the
All about
automation,
automation. Yeah.
all about automation. So they will slowly but surely find efficiencies because for them, it's always going to be about the bottom line. And when
Mhm.
we teach our young people from a very early age that whether you work for yourself or you work for others, it's always going to come back to the bottom line and maximizing resources. And when you
Mhm.
teach them that from early on, they understand it. They understand finance, they understand money, they understand business, and they understand that how do I find the most efficient way to do XYZ? And how do I do that in my business or in the business that I work for? And so it's literally shifting the mind of our young people, as they go. And I promise you, as I know this is not happening in your everyday school. I know. I don't even care if it's a private preparatory school. It's not happening there because
Right.
that's not the nature of education as it currently stands.
Right. Right. We've got this boxed way of looking at education. We pick up a chemistry book and we open it, a textbook, and we go through each of these chemistry concepts at a time out of context. So most of the time the
Yeah.
kids aren't really getting it. They
Right.
don't understand it and
Right.
they end up not liking it. And if they had a project,
Right.
they might actually like it.
Right.
So
Right.
they're not really seeing the world through a chemist's eyes. So when
Right.
you say that little girl who
Yes.
sees herself as a chemist,
Right.
You know, that's not because you gave her a textbook.
No, not at all. Actually, she probably, all of them would kind of push that away. For her, she likes the hands-on. She likes to be able to touch and feel and understand. And so when you're talking to her and you're trying to help her learn and understand things, for her, it's all about auditory and visual. She has to be able to see, touch, and feel something, and then it sparks her, her curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't gone away. She really considers herself a chemist, and for her, anything that you bring to her that has to do with putting together chemical formulas, she's all over it. And so we also talk, like most people, I think I learned about the periodic table, I don't know, maybe in 8th grade, but I'm pretty sure it probably was high school. We talk about the periodic table in kindergarten. They have to be able to understand these things. And for me, it's just because I believe the children are limitless, and I meet them where they are. You know what I mean? It's like we give them these subjects that are up here,
Mm-hmm.
and we find out where they are from that, as opposed to saying, okay, we're all going to start down here,
Right.
and barely move up. No, we start you up here, and if you're not getting something, okay, we modify to make sure that you get it. Because that way, then we also don't limit children that may already be here. It keeps the
Mm-hmm.
kids at all different points of where they lie on the scale, and leave it that way, as opposed to putting them all in a box and saying, okay, you're in kindergarten, this is what you learn in kindergarten, and that's the end of it. No.
Mm. So how do you keep the kids who maybe don't get it? Like when you give them this subject like the periodic table and they're looking at it, like how do you keep them from feeling bad? Because we live in a society that will shame you for what you don't know or what you don't understand.
That's one of the
How do you
things
get
we
around
talk
that?
Yeah, that's one of the things we talk to the parents about from very early on. I think that a lot more of what I do is modification of parents than I do modification of children, because a lot of
Mm,
parents like to put their kids in boxes and want their kids to be, do, and think and act in a certain way. And it's important for parents to divorce that perspective,
mhm,
and try to step out of themselves and remind themselves of what it was like to be a child, because I think we forget that, and to understand how that judgment can like literally tear their little hearts apart. And for them, feeling like they got something wrong is like a big deal. To us, it's kind of like, oh, this is a part of life. But no, it's really not a part of life. I guess it's my empath. I'm an empath. And so my nature is I want to be gentle to people. And so for kids, I guess that's why I get along with children, because I see the world through their lens, so to speak. And so for me, it's really about helping the parents modify themselves, so that they can better understand their young people. And so
mm,
with regards to the periodic table, let's say if we're talking about like carbon or hydrogen, whatever it is, it's about showing them in the real world where it exists. It's about, if you have to go to a YouTube video and show something, show it to them, explaining to them that we are made of carbon, right? And explaining to them why water is H2, just going through that process, giving them again that visual, because I think everybody has this perspective of textbook, textbook, textbook. Yeah, I'm a book junkie, and we've got tons of books that are not even remotely close to behind me, right? But at the end of the day, it's not all about that. It's about, for us, being hands-on. For the kids that are hands-on, because some of the parents aren't. They receive us virtually in a different way. So I want to be crystal clear about that. They
mhm,
get either pre-recorded things. It depends on how they sign up with us or whatever. But the kids that are in our live programs, where they get to interact and engage, then obviously it's a different perspective. But when we're running, let's say, like engineering, the kids are literally, it's not just engineering because they looked in a book and it's like, oh, we're going to learn this concept. No, it's literally taking, I'm looking at a bunch of blocks in front of me, because this is a part of our classroom. We have this big classroom, but they literally have all of the like little blocks and little things. And like we store and save, when you have the, what do you call it? The toilet paper and the paper towel, the what is the thing called inside of, inside the roll of toilet paper, and inside the rolls of paper towels. We literally
Yeah.
take
Yeah. Like
we,
cardboard
yeah, the cardboard. We
roll or whatever.
literally take cardboard and build buildings and create structures. And like at one point we use them to create bats for Halloween. And I used to be like, we used to decorate everything around the classroom so that the kids could see them or whatever. And so we literally take little dowels and little cubes and help them build. Like my son, one of his projects in the social mixer is that he wanted to build a roller coaster because he's fascinated with engineering. And so for him, he has he likes roller coasters, and he also likes ferry boats. So we take cardboard and we literally cut it out and make replicas of real ships. And we make replicas of real roller coasters. And so he has these grand ideas of what the metal roller coasters look like. And he tries to figure out, well, how can we take wood and turn them into things that look like, these metal roller coasters out there. And so it's just allowing the young people to have their minds and say, you know what, this is something that I want to build and create. And then actually do it. If it fails, so what? It fails, but at least they've learned how to try to create something, and they learn about modification. And once they're done with that, oh, how could I have done that better? Or what kind of materials could I have used differently so that I could create this, right? So my son knows if he wants it to look like a real roller coaster, we're going to have to utilize welding and and actually use metal materials as opposed to using wooden sticks and so on and so forth.
Right. So I know there's some parents listening to this that are thinking, oh my God, this sounds so exciting. And then they're like, how on earth can I how can I do this? Like, I don't have a degree. I don't have any background in engineering or math, or how does a parent, how do you pull something? Because I'm sure you've got a pretty robust background in it, right? But I'm sure you don't have a background in everything the kids are interested in. How do you do that?
I I am not the most amazing artist in the world, right? But for me, I utilize resources to help my young people. When we have tons of canvases and stuff, and sometimes we'll use a YouTube video to create something. Next month, in our next semester, we're starting to bring in way more educators that are specialists in these different fields so that they can come in. Like our music director, he's coming in, and he also has music and theater. So our young people are going to be learning how to put together Zoom presentations, of their theatrical arts. And we're
I
going
was
to be
about to
working on
ask you, like,
script writing.
theater, I'm thinking in person, but you're virtual.
Yeah, we're virtual.
How does that work?
It's amazing. I mean, here's the thing. The kids don't mind. Most often it's the parents. The parents say kids mind. I think because of what happened over the last year, if the parents were doing virtual learning through the traditional model, you can't take a traditional school and put it in a Zoom class and think that's going to work. It's not.
Yeah, a lot of
Our
kids
whole perspective is very different, right? And so the purpose of the Zoom is for them to have that support and that engagement, right? So while everybody has their supplies on whatever they're working through, they're working through it, and they're being guided as they're working through their projects individually, and they're showing their progress as we're going through the course. And depending on what it is, it may not be done completed within an hour, and it has to take over several weeks. And depending on what the assignment is, we would give them direction on how to work on it through the week. And so that the next week they come, then they're presenting where they are, and then we continue. It just depends on the age and what the program is. But at the end of the day, it's always about helping them through that process, and also having other age peers along with them to go through that journey. And you should hear them. They're so encouraging of one another. They're so supportive of one another, because, and they've become like friends. Many of the children, they pick up the phone and call each other. I mean, I don't know about anybody else's kids, but these children literally are asking, they go in and they send each other their own Zoom links to play with each other when they're not in our school, so to speak. So is there a problem with Zoom, or is it the adult's problem with Zoom? Because that's
a good question.
Yeah.
It's a very good question.
Yeah.
So now, so do you consider yourself an unschooler? And I want to bring that concept back for for the people who are watching who may not know what that is,
Yes, I
right?
would consider myself definitely more of an unschooler because of the way we approach learning. Um, I don't believe in putting boxes and limitations on our young people. I believe that the statistics speak for themselves. Homeschool children tend to outperform their age peers in
It's true.
traditional school
This is true,
environments
no matter
many
which
times over. Yeah.
model they choose.
Mhm,
So tell
mhm.
us what an unschooler is.
The funniest thing for me is I just follow project-based learning. It's for
Okay.
me, it just makes sense. But in that sense, there are schools in America, like traditional schools that follow the. I know there's one private school in Texas that we had visited that definitely, in Dallas, that definitely was, they were into the project-based learning. That was the way that they were set up.
Mhm.
For us, the reason why we would be considered traditional unschoolers is because one, I don't believe that kids should just be waking up 8 o'clock just to be up at 8 o'clock. If
Mhm.
you start your day at 11 o'clock, you start your day at 11 o'clock. That's what works for your family.
Mm.
I also don't believe in 6 to 8 hour school days. Children can learn a heck of a lot in a shorter period of time than that, and they move through their learning and get more immersed in their learning with less time than that. Also, I don't believe in keeping children like traditionally. If a child is happy, most of the time they'll lose interest or get fatigued around 30 to 40 minutes, right?
Mhm.
But if a child is really happy in their learning and you see that they're like shooting past 45 minutes an hour and they're ready to keep going, why are we stopping them from that learning just because,
Right.
oh, it's not on our schedule? And so
Right.
that's the perspective of unschooling. I would say that we are, is that I don't believe in limiting children. I believe in allowing them to foster that level of mastery and whatever it is that they so choose. Obviously, yes, we have to give them that well-rounded experience, but we can do that in so many different ways. And I don't think it has to be in buckets and meticulous timetables and so on and so forth, to keep them, you know learning and growing at the way in the way that most suits them. And you can have four different children. You could be a parent of four different children. They all learn in different ways. How can
They
we
do.
expect a school system to be able to do that, but we're not willing to do it for ourselves in our own homes?
That's a good question, actually.
Yeah.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'd like to know, and I'm sure somebody's going to ask this question. How? Like if I have four different children and they all learn differently and they're all at different stages and ages, right? Different
Mhm,
interests.
mhm,
How do you give to each? I mean, I know people who homeschool like 7, 8, 9, 10 kids,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
How do you give that? And you running this academy, is that what you call it, an academy? Or do you have a different
Yeah,
name?
we just call it Noble Kiddo School, but yeah, it's
Okay.
either way. It's just a learning environment.
Learning
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, how do you do that for each individual kid? How do you customize? How are you thinking that you're able to do that?
From the very beginning, like say for example, we're starting in whenever you start school, because we're not these August, September people either. We personally, us personally, some don't, are we educate throughout the year. We don't stop
Okay.
just because it's summertime. I don't believe in any
Okay.
learning loss. You learn all the time because in the real world, you don't just take off 2 months from work. You keep going.
Yeah, very few
Maybe you
people
get your
have
2
that
weeks.
liberty. Right.
Right. So it's like, it's from my perspective, you never create that mindset that you're going to get 2 months off. You just create the mindset that you're always working no matter what. And so
Right.
I guess that also helps with making up for the times when you're doing other things. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we let
Mhm.
them go an hour here. Okay, it doesn't matter because you have like an extra 2 months of time to get this stuff done, right? So
Right.
um, I think that in the very beginning, when you make the decision to be a homeschooling family, if your children have ever been in school, you definitely have to deschool. And in that deschooling process, it's important to learn each of your children,
Mhm.
because just because they got XYZ grades in school or however they performed doesn't mean that they don't love a subject. Like you'll hear a lot of children say, between grades, I would say K through 3, definitely, and possibly up to 5 or 6, you'll hear children say they love science. And then after they get to 7th and 8th
Something
grade, they
happened.
hate it.
Uh-huh.
And math, yeah. And it's because of the way it's being delivered to them. And so definitely K through 3, you're always going to hear the kids talk about science all the time, science and space and all that. That's all they talk about. And then all of a sudden it becomes this thing that they loathe. And it has everything to do with the delivery of it. And so it's
Right.
really, really important for you to find out what makes your child tick. You know, I know my son is an engineer. I know that. That's without question. And for him, coding just comes second nature because it's just another form of engineering, right? So
Mhm.
I know that about him. I've known that because I pay attention. That's who he is. And just like the young lady that you talked about, I know that she's a chemist. You know, it doesn't matter how she performs in anything else. She's a chemist. And so for her, we adapt things for her. When we have our artists, we understand those are artists. They live, breathe, and think of how to create these beautiful, you know, imaginations and bring them to life on paper. How
Mhm.
do we help them maximize that? How do we help them grow? I think what happens is we get so caught up once again in what the curriculum says we're supposed to do, that, oh, they're supposed to do this, and this, that we forget that I understand, yes, you have to learn American history, but is not science history a part of American history?
Mm. Mhm.
And so aren't laws or patents and how patent laws work, isn't that a part of the law? Right? And so
Mhm.
it's really, really important. I mean, I get, you know, some people say, well, they have to be able to know about this war and that war. And are they going to school to learn history? Are they going to get a degree in history when they get to college? Is that why they need to know and understand this? Because I'm pretty certain if you have a young person that has a generalized knowledge of things, but they have a specialization in whatever subject matter that they're into. When they graduate from high school, their level of mastery of this thing, when they get, if they decide to go to college, great. But if not, depending on how they've come to us, they'll have a portfolio of work that they can utilize to be able to push out to the world to say, here is all the things that I've done over the last 5, 10, I don't even know, even if it's just a year. This is my contribution. This is my level of thinking. I can handle an interview because I understand how things work. I understand how business works, and I understand why you would want to hire me over someone who doesn't have my perspective,
Mm.
right? And I have this specialized knowledge, and I have all of these experiences because we create experiences. It's not just about passing tests and doing all this. It's like this is what I bring to the table. Is that not a more qualified person than a person who can give you a lot of knowledge about a lot of things that mean absolutely nothing
That they don't
to
really have an
anything?
understanding of
Right.
it, like
They
a
have
chef
no
eating,
understanding. I'm
right?
just blurting out all of these facts to you.
Basically
What do
spitting
they
out
mean?
like a memory, like, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Very good memorizing,
Right. And
right?
sorry, what does that really mean? Having all of that, what does it really mean? And I'm not saying give up on, you know, all of this other knowledge, but I'm saying at least give your young person the opportunity to do a lot of what they love. And then that stuff will become easier for them to approach. They won't feel like they're so bogged down with all of these perspectives of things that don't matter to them because they already have this whole other world of things that matter to them that they get to master and get to put all of their energy into, and they feel supported in that. So it's easier for them to give, yeah, I can work, you know, an hour or however many, you know, what's required of the week to work on these other subjects that don't matter to me as much
Mhm.
because I've worked on all of this. And again, the way that it's all structured from our perspective is how do we tie math back into that? Like if you're an artist, you can tie math into art all day long. If you're,
Mm.
you know, engineer, of course you're going to tie math in, right? If you're a scientist,
Right,
if you're a coder, you can always tie that back in. And with
right,
regards to reading, you're always going to be reading, always. So what are you
right.
really missing?
That's a good question. That's a very good question, and a very different way of looking at education. So we're running out of time because we could go on. Like this could literally be a 3-hour show easy. So you're gonna have to come back, and I'm gonna have to pick your brain some more on behalf of my audience.
Awesome.
Because we have to I really do feel like we need to be thinking, um, moving forward with the challenges that we have. We're
Yeah.
going to have to think about life, the world. We have to think differently.
Very,
You
very.
know, we're going to have to really understand and not just us, right? Because we think about us. What about our children?
Right.
I'm very big on that. Like we could
Right.
learn how to grow food and build house. Like we could do all this great stuff,
Exactly.
right? Make
Yeah.
all of these fabulous changes. But if we don't educate our children to move forward with that
Hmm.
vision, then what have we done? Right? Like
Right.
how far is that vision going to last? Not very long because we're not here to stay.
Right.
We don't come to this planet to stay. So we have to be thinking about our young people and how we educate them and how we prepare them for the world to come. So tell the audience how to find you.
Okay, one thing I wanted to say as you were speaking, because I want this to be crystal clear, because I think that sometimes as parents, we fall back into this thing. We think of college, 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 because that's what's been ingrained in us.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Gates did not graduate from college. Mark Zuckerberg did not graduate from college. Steve Jobs did not graduate from college. I just want you to be clear. And there are
There's a bunch of people
and
who did
tons of people
big
who,
stuff that didn't graduate from college.
so who taught Mark Zuckerberg how to run a company? Who taught him how
Or how to program, right? Like where do
to
you get
program? And you know what I mean?
how
It's
to run a team?
like, yeah, who taught all of these people to do all these things? Or did they learn the skill set to be able to manage others to do it for them? And so I
Mm-hmm.
just want us to understand, like Henry Ford, I think they tried to insult him at one point by saying that, you know, he didn't know how to do something. I think he was under a court of law or something. And they said, well, you don't know how to do X, Y, Z. And he called someone into the
I
room and he
remember,
said,
yes.
yes, he called someone into the room and the person had given the answer. And he says, I don't need to have the answer because that's what he is for. Right. And so it's really, really important for us to understand that perspective. When
Mm-hmm.
I say to you, your child is really great at this thing, let's turn your child into a master of this
Mm-hmm.
thing and have
Mm-hmm.
them have all of that knowledge, because then they come out and into the workforce and into the world, you know, little masters of this, and then they get to expand that however they so choose. But at least they got that opportunity to do so from a very brilliant perspective and not a
Right.
limited boxed in one. But to
Right.
find me, it's novokiddo.com. I just had to share that because it's so, I felt like
No,
people
I
need
think it's completely relevant to the conversation,
Mhm.
you know, because I think like even in homeschooling, when I was homeschooling through my years, I remember like what getting to the high school stage and thinking, oh my God, like what are we gonna how's she gonna get in, you know, how's she gonna get into college? How are we gonna what can I, you know what I mean? Like just going through the fear that I went through when I was
Mhm.
deciding to homeschool and stepping away from, you know, the beaten path
Mhm.
all over again when my daughter got older, my
Mhm.
eldest, when she started reaching that stage, I was like, you know, how am I gonna do this? And then I realized at some point that this is where the real possibilities come in. Like this is where where they can really unfold as a human being
Right.
and figure out their place in the world and figure out what they like doing
Right.
instead of preparing for, and you know, this is not nothing against those of you who are preparing your children for the SATs
Right.
and going the beaten path. Like it should all be, this is all choice.
Right. It's all
I'm
choice.
all choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But, you know, are you making a choice if you've never thought about the possibility that there's another way to do it? And
Right.
that's what this conversation is about.
Right.
Really just
Exactly.
putting out other choices,
Right.
right? Putting out other ideas so that you can actually say, you know, I think the beaten path is for me and
Mhm.
my child. You know, I think I want to go that route. That all sounds great, but this is what I want to choose. Or you might realize that there are other choices to make, and maybe you don't want that beaten path. Maybe you just never thought of something else, you
Right.
know,
Right.
or seen other people doing it successfully.
Right. Because I don't know about many of the families out here. I understand the whole SAT path, but there are a lot of families, because of the way homeschooling is structured, where their children at younger ages are already taking college courses anyway.
Right.
And so they already
Right.
know whether or not this fits for them. And so if
Right.
you're one of the parents that have your children in high school already, or even in junior high, already taking college level courses, you can have a child graduate with an associate's degree already before they finish high school. So
Right.
they're
Or
not even really
bachelor's,
thinking,
depending
right?
on the
They're not
kid,
even
what they want to do, you know,
right. If that's what they want to
what
do.
your family plan is,
Right.
right? I mean, because
Right.
everybody's different.
Right. And I've seen a number of families go that route. So what
Mhm.
SAT?
Right. That's how I felt about it. You know, I was like, SAT, like, why are you going to spend these critical years where you're transitioning into adulthood? This is just me. I'm not, like I said, this is not a knock on the SAT or
Right.
anybody who takes the beaten path, right? Because it is all choice. But my reasoning was, you know, I want my kids to be thinking about what they want to do in life and
Right.
what their contribution is to the world. I don't really want them figuring out what bubble to fill in unless it was a part of their plan,
Right. Exactly.
right? I want to go to this school to study
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I could get in there for free if I score over that on
Right.
that
Right. Right.
SAT. Now
Right.
they're
Right.
going at it with a different mindset because
Mhm.
it's a step in their plan, not just
Right.
doing it because that's what you do when you get to 8th
Right.
grade, right?
Right. Right.
I don't
Right.
wanna move through life like that myself, and I didn't wanna raise my kids to move through life like that. I wanted them to think through everything they did and have it be a part of their plan.
Right, right. And I'll just say this before we go, and I know that a lot of people are going to think, "Oh, she's big, big on tech." Yeah, pretty much, probably I am. But
Well, we're
so
living in the technical, I mean,
yeah,
metaverse and
yeah,
you know, there's all this stuff going over a lot of people, the digital bitcoins is over my head,
yeah.
you know? So I don't think our kids will get away with that being over their head.
No,
I don't even know that we'll get away with moving
no,
forward
no.
with that being over our heads. Like, we're gonna
Right.
need to understand this stuff.
Yes, 100%, especially if things go the way they're projected to go. And
Right.
so, with that, I would say this: during the Industrial Revolution, people weren't necessarily going to college, right? And everybody was employed by some type of corporation, and they had that skill set, whatever that skill set was, that was able to, where they were machinists, whatever it was that they did to, take them through life. And I hear a lot of parents now talking about they want their children to learn HVAC and plumbing and so on and so forth because those are lucrative positions
They
compared to
are.
all these college degrees. There's
Uh-huh.
some yeah,
Way
I know
less
some
tech.
very well-to-do HVAC specialists, like millionaire. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you, and these people, and I promise you, the one that I know does not have a college degree. Okay.
Mm.
And so the thing is that's where we are in that phase in this new, I believe it's the fourth industrial revolution, right? And so at the end of the day, our young people, I promise you, if you have a young person that is very, very fluent in coding, they will never be without a job. Never,
No.
never,
Degree
ever,
or no degree,
ever.
right? Because once you master something, you write your own ticket.
Yes, especially in this day and age that we're living
Right.
in.
Right.
It's like they'll never go hungry.
No.
No,
No. And you probably could do that way cheaper than what
you
people
can
are
learn how to
spending to
code
send
in
their
your
kids.
home.
Yeah, to send their kids to college. And then when you look at, I mean, you say, oh, well, there's scholarships, right? Yeah, there are, but when you think about the energy and time that you put into get this is just my thinking. Like I said, like
Mm,
not no knock on people who are going this route because it is all choice.
of course, of course.
But just an alternative thought. That's what I'm throwing out, right? When you think about the amount of childhood and teenagehood, right? Young adulthood that they put towards that scholarship, they maybe could have earned that 10 times working on one of these projects that taught them
Listen.
some stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
Learning those entrepreneurial concepts
yeah.
and figuring out where they stand in the world.
Yeah.
It might be worth more to them than that scholarship to a school that's going to give them a paper that, honestly, guys, like, don't take our word for it, will be worthless soon, right? Pretty much worthless.
I did say at the beginning I had a political science degree.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I do not work in the field of political science.
Well, that happens all the time, right? And even people who do go to school and learn, and then they go into their field, they say, everything I did on the job, I didn't learn none of it in school.
No,
I
no.
learned it all literally on the job.
And I'll just say this to go one further. And that degree was earned for free. I had a scholarship. So, but still, most of the time when in the traditional structure, and I know we have to go, in the traditional structure, our young people are doing things that are so regimented that by the time they get to being high school seniors or juniors, when they're looking to college, they don't even know who they are anymore. So they don't know most often what makes them tick. And as a result, they'll go to school and try to get a degree in something, or maybe even change their major a couple of times. And then they find themselves, even if they go into the field 5, 6, maybe even 10 years down the line, they don't even want to be there anymore. And they're switching out. Why not give them the opportunity? And most of the time, if you go to those people at 30 years old and you ask them, what are they doing now or when they've transitioned, I promise you, most of them will remind you of what they loved as a kid.
That's deep right there. We're going to leave on that note. I want you guys to look up. I want you to look up Claudine Winston. Thank you so much, my beautiful sister, for being here. And I appreciate you. And we are going to continue this discussion because I think there's a bunch of stuff that we could have touched on that we need to touch on. Even those of you who think, I don't want to homeschool, I'm fine with sending my children. So I'm fine with, I use the word outsourcing, right? Because you as the parent are still responsible for your children's education, whether you outsource it or outsource parts of it or not. So even if you outsource your children's education to public school or private school or whatever, right? These are concepts that is for every parent, auntie, grandma. Like if there are children in your life, this is a relevant discussion.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, we're not just for the people who need their kids in all the time. We're an enrichment program also. So if you need someone to support you beyond the traditional school system, we can have those conversations as well, because your child might be interested in robotics and want to be involved in robotics competition. And they want to be exposed to other youth that are not in their traditional school environment and meeting people from all over the globe, so there's that option as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Imagine a world where our children were allowed to thrive, learn, and grow in a way that fed their full potential. I believe that it's not just enough for us to say no. I always say this, right? But that we have to be very clear about what we want to see in the world. And then we must understand that our children will play a pivotal role in the world we want to usher in. Be the change that you want to see in this world. I'm Sumayyah Simone, and thank you for watching What's Your View?